It's always just between us, all right?
You tuned to Between Us and 938 Live. Thanks for joining us today. We're talking a little bit now about the Global Social Innovators Forum, which is coming up in a while. And we're going to talk a bit about the event per se. But we also have two guests with us in the studio today who are going to share more about their personal stories also. Dr. William Tan is resident physician at National Cancer Centre Singapore. And Dr. Tan's going to give us quite an overview of his life story so far. And also Desmond is on the SIP Board of Directors. He'll share more information about the Global Social Innovators Forum as well. Dr. Tan, Desmond, great to have both of you in the studio.
My pleasure to be here.
Hi, Angela and all listeners of 938.
Very excited to talk to you, Dr. Tan, because, you have quite a fascinating story that you've been through. Tell us a bit about, when you were first diagnosed with polio at a very young age. How did you cope with that?
It was at the age of 2. It's all what my mom told me, because I have no idea how I became afflicted with polio. But I knew that there was a big epidemic in the early 60s. And even though the polio vaccine was around, my parents were not aware. And so I missed out on the polio vaccine and became paralyzed from the waist down. Quite a big burden for my parents, because during those days there were not a lot of support systems. And during those days also there were this whole set of beliefs that, having a polio was really because my parents have done something wrong.
Right.
So we were very much ostracized by relatives and friends, and it was quite a lonely affair for my parents to bring me up. They could have given me up because a lot of parents in those days were doing so, and they left the children in the hospital. But my parents were very determined. They just felt that this little boy can have a life, and they're willing to nurture me and give me the parental love. And in retrospect, I'm very grateful to them, because they didn't send me to Red Cross Home or Josiah Home or any of the other homes that were set up in those days. And they believed that education is going to transform my life, even though I'm paralyzed from the waist down. They felt that I still have a good brain that is not paralyzed by polio, a good pair of arms that can be developed. So they had a hard time putting me to school, because in those days also schools were not accessible, and a lot of the schools authorities turned them down. But they kept knocking until one day a door opened and I had a chance to go to kindergarten. But it was also short-lived, because I couldn't cope with all the bullies and all these remarks by my fellow students, and we fought, and I was expelled from kindergarten. It's very embarrassing. I became a dropout very early in life, but I was very determined when I was given a second chance. When a primary school principal decided to admit me to the school, and I was catching up, because I didn't have the opportunity to learn much in kindergarten. So with the determination and all the guidance from my parents, I topped the whole standard of primary 1.
Wow,
I became
that's
first.
Amazing.
Yeah, and that was transforming, because I realized that I can turn dreams into reality, even though I'm considered a handicap. That I can chase my dreams. So it was one big turning point in my life, and I became really serious. And I even wrote in my composition in school that I want to be a doctor, because I have traveled that journey of physical suffering, and I want to help other people as well. And so education was a very big thing in my life, and I'm very grateful to the teachers who believe in me, that in spite of my physical challenge, I can go about fulfilling my dreams.
It does seem like, a lot of, why you were so motivated and so encouraged was because, people around you definitely believed in your abilities. They believed in what you could achieve, despite what, the typical person at the time was telling your parents, right? It's unlucky. It's something that wasn't very favorable for you. When you were schooling, you encountered the power of sport, wasn't it? You found out that engaging in sport is something that's very powerful for you. Tell us a bit about that.
Certainly. When I was in school, I was very protected. I think the school authority believed that it might be too dangerous to go out and do PE. And so I was all the time in class looking after the backs of my fellow students. They felt that I could play an important role looking after the backs. But I was quite a restless boy, always looking out the window and very much envious of what my fellow classmates were doing in the field. It was not until after my O-level that I read a very inspiring story of Mr. Wahid Baba. And he was injured in the line of duty during the confrontation days, and the government sent him to Stoke Mandeville Hospital in United Kingdom, and he came back to Singapore and started to groom sports disabled athletes. And I read about his story, and I went in a taxi to Farrer Park Stadium and meet up with him. And that was the second transformation in my life, because as you've heard about it, that sports play a very important part in my life, in the sense that prior to that I was a very unhealthy person. I was constantly sick, but when I started to be involved in sports, I became quite a lot fitter. And not only that, I gained a lot of self-esteem as well, knowing that I'm good at doing sports.
Right. We'll find out what exactly those sports were, and also how that helped you, Dr. Tan, as well, gain more self-confidence, and how, of course, you're continuing to inspire others as well with your achievements as well. Talking today to Dr. William Tan, who's a Paralympian ultramarathoner and also resident physician at National Cancer Centre Singapore. Joining him today and going to tell us more about the Global Social Innovators Forum is Desmond, who's on the SIP Board of Directors. We'll continue this conversation in just a bit. Stay tuned.
Reset your relationships in Between Us. Our soulful encounter is always just between us on 938 Live.
Chatting today with Dr. William Tan, who is Paralympian ultramarathoner and resident physician at National Cancer Centre Singapore. Dr. Tan's been sharing so far a story about, despite being stricken with polio at a young age, Dr. Tan, you've also managed to gain some confidence through sports. Tell us a bit about what sport you started out with.
Coach Wahid was very open. He gave me every opportunity to try all kinds of sports. The middle distance athletics on the track, and few events like throwing a javelin, shot put, discus. And he constantly encouraged me to try all kinds of sports before settling down to something I'm really good at. And I'm very grateful to him, because I realized after trying out all the different disciplines in sports, that truly my main passion is in wheelchair athletics. So, and he recognized that I don't have a wheelchair, I borrowed his wheelchair, and he realized that it was really hard to convince me not to borrow his chair, because I always put him on the stadium steps, and I'll go around the track in his wheelchair, and he get really worried about it. There's that anxiety there, because the wheelchair is very personal.
Yes.
So, and I started to show results as well, performing well in the national championship, winning gold medals and setting records for Singapore. And I think it was the time that he recognized that he wanted to give me the full attention to developing me into a middle distance athlete. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like, there's a lot of support. People are very, very much, they believe so much in you, Dr. Tan. But I think a lot of it is also personal grit. I think on some level, while people tell you sometimes that you can't do things, or sometimes society doesn't understand, physical impairment in some way, you also had certain mentalities and mindsets that kept you going. What were some of these things you told yourself?
Sure. Excuse me. Adversity is a certain way of changing a person. I had the personal adversity very young at it, but I think the guidance of my parents and my teachers, I realized that there's something good in adversity, that it can strengthen us. So I had an early setback of being kicked out of kindergarten, and I think that also changed me as well, that I have to really not take it for granted. Education don't come easy. My parents knocking on the doors of schools. So given the second chance, I realized that I'm going to be very serious about it. So looking back, I think I'm no longer afraid of setbacks in life, that I know that tough times never last, but tough people do. This is a saying by Robert Schubert. that is so inspiring, that has guided me all my life, that tough times can really transform us.
It's also what you make of it sometimes, I mean, also as a voice of inspiration to others, like yourself, whether suffering from polio or in some way, there is some impairment where they have to face some challenges that most normal people don't. What are some things that, you think particular to you, but what are some things you tell yourself when times are really bad that keep you going?
Well, let me relate a story. In 2009, I was in the pinnacle of my life. But I was diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia during a marathon in Paris. And that was devastating because I thought that, I'm too strong to fail. But it humbled me. And I really had to relate to those approaches and principles and beliefs that I've always embraced during the years of my life. And it was a real test for me because I was given 12 months to live with my advanced leukemia. And suddenly, with the support of my wife and the people around me, I was determined to say, I'm going to fight this cancer. It's a different race. It's very different from all the marathons and ultra marathons, that this is a race against cancer. And I tell myself that truly tough times never last, but tough people do. I'm going to live through, fight this cancer, and I'm going to be a better doctor.
We're going to hear a bit more of just how exactly you did that, Dr. Tan, in just a bit as well. Chatting today with Dr. William Tan, who's resident physician at National Cancer Centre, Singapore, despite being diagnosed with polio at a young age. Dr. Tan is a Paralympian ultramarathoner, and of course we're going to hear more from Desmond, who's on the Singapore Innovation Park Board of Directors, or in just a bit about the Global Social Innovators Forum. And when we continue with this in just a bit, stay tuned.
Man is a knot into which relationships are tied, but nothing comes between us. On 938 Live. Reset your relationships in Between Us.
Chatting today with Paralympian ultramarathoner and resident physician at the National Cancer Centre, Singapore, Dr. William Tan, who is one of the speakers at the Global Social Innovators Forum, or GSIF. Joining him today to tell us more about the GSIF is Desmond, who's on the Social Innovation Park Board of Directors. Now let's continue a little bit with Desmond, because tell us a bit about the GSIF and why you guys wanted to start this whole project.
Sure. It's my honor to be here in person with Dr. Tan to share such an inspiring story. There's a few keywords that Dr. Tan just mentioned, like equal opportunity in education, empowerment, and how it has been transformed, through all this year. This is exactly what SIP aspires to achieve and aim to achieve, is to create a robust and dynamic social entrepreneurial community, so that to bring about positive transformation to a society that endure to build a more beautiful and inclusive and more sustainable world. Sounds
wonderful. Right. And of course, you have a lot of high-profile speakers coming in as well. We can look forward to that. I mean, other stories, like Dr. Tan's, very inspiring for the Singaporeans.
Yeah, exactly. We have a lot of other speakers who have a similar inspiring story to tell. And this year, Global Innovator Forum 2, we introduced a new segment which we call a Inclusive Art Showcase. So this is a platform where we make it in a very interactive way with our delegates, where interactive, inclusive art showcase, where we will showcase it's like a platform for a disadvantaged and the marginalized community of people with an equal platform to showcase their talents, so that they can. It's also awareness to bring about a positive message about their marginalization in society.
I mean, Dr. Tan, jump in on this as well. I mean, you mentioned that, back in the day when you were growing up with polio, there were very little opportunities that were given, very little platforms like this one, where people were given the opportunity to shine, even though they have all this potential. Tell us a bit about the social advocacy work that you do and why that's so important to you.
The personal challenges that I encounter, in some ways, was a big trigger that invigorated me to be an agent of change. For instance, growing up, moving around was a huge difficulty because I encountered steps. I encountered problems getting access in the buildings. So I would be constantly writing letters to the authorities, hoping that the authorities could initiate changes, making buildings accessible. And indeed, they were very forthcoming. And that's one thing wonderful about our leaders and our authorities in Singapore, that they respond to needs, respond to feedback. So I was getting very gratified that the ramp that I see along some parts of Singapore was actually started when I wrote a letter to the authority, and it's still there. Looking back 20, 30 years ago, I wrote that letter, and that ramp is just out there. And when I gained more momentum, I became the president of the Handicaps Welfare Association, and with my team of committee members, we went about initiating more changes in the area of transportation and employment of the disabled. So we felt that we need to communicate our needs. And for myself, I felt that I was blessed with a good education. I have received scholarships and bursaries, and it's about time for me to give back, to make a difference, to help my other fellow disabled who do not have those kind of opportunities. So that was my way of giving back. And in some ways, it has turned out to be very, very positive. I'll give you an example. Way back in 1986, we went to meet the Minister, Dr. Yeo Ning Hong, about the MRT. And we were disappointed when we left the Minister's office because he told us that it was not the time yet. But he made a promise that one day it will happen. And years went by, and we waited patiently. And 10 years, 15 years went by, and it really happens. And for us, we saw the kind of impact we have made. And we have seen disabled now coming out and interacting and be integrated in the mainstream of society, going about their life, whether it be going about with socializing or being gainfully employed. So we derive so much satisfaction that we have made a difference in a positive sense, and we will continue, especially in the area of employment, because employment is such a big issue among the disabled, because many of the disabled have talents as well, and they can also be contributing Singaporeans if given the opportunity. So I'm a strong believer to encourage inclusiveness in our society, that disabled be given the opportunities. And I'm also a strong believer that affirmative action should be embraced by our various authorities, by our corporate bodies, that by our educational institutions. Many of our schools are not accessible for many of the disabled. So in some ways, they become a barrier to our young people who want to move forward, and yet they encounter barriers, structural as well as mindset barriers as well.
Yeah, it's so amazing that, being someone who was held back by some of these barriers in the past, you now are, tapping on the kind of support and encouragement from people who believed in you. You're now kind of doing the same. You're paying it forward to the young people now who feel like they need help. More importantly, it's about having that voice, giving, everyone, whether it's a physically disabled person, someone who's visually impaired, for example, it's about giving them the voice, and writing letters was one way that you managed to get the message out. And now we look at all these ramps in accessibility. Tell us a bit about the idea of a social innovator. I mean, it's called a Desmond Global Social Innovators Forum. What do you all think a social innovator really is?
Yeah, Social Innovator Forums, our upcoming event, which is on 28th November, will be exactly like to have a change maker like Dr. Tan's to be on the platform to share all their stories so that people are inspired. Our this year theme is actually about inclusive innovation, shaping your future. So that is a platform where encourage the inclusiveness in the problem solving, decision making, on how innovation that can come in through a complexity of life today, and how you can then go through facing and solving your problem. So shaping your future by inclusive innovation that is where we can come together and solving, either your personal problem or even the greater problem when you're facing it.
Right, it sounds good. And speaking of solving problems, we're going to kind of pick Dr. Tan's brain here and what more can be done. How we can all improve. Whether you're an everyday Singaporean, whether you're a policymaker, how can we actually reach out to help those disadvantaged and marginalized in our society? Also, we're hearing more from Desmond about the kind of speakers that we can expect at the GSIF forum as well, and other inspiring stories that might be coming up that we can look forward to there. This conversation will continue in just a bit. Dr. William Tan is my guest today. He's resident physician at National Cancer Centre Singapore, joined by Desmond Kock, who's on the Social Innovation Park Board of Directors. Stay tuned for more.
It's always just between us, all right? Our soulful encounter is always just between us on 938 Live.
Paralympian ultramarathoner and resident physician at the National Cancer Centre Singapore, Dr. William Tan, sharing his story, and also Desmond Kock from the Social Innovation Park Board of Directors sharing about Global Social Innovators Forum. More details coming up from Desmond in a bit. I want to get to Dr. Tan first. I mean, you're an ultramarathoner and you're a Paralympian. Tell us a bit about how ultramarathons for you helped inspire and kind of shape the kind of expectations people have of those who are marginalized.
I started to do ultramarathons in 1987. It was not so much in trying to make an impact in sports, but it was inspired by the needs of the community, and I thought I could use sports as a platform to raise awareness of the needy in our community. So my first event was 16 hours non-stop push in my wheelchair to raise money for kidney patients. And I empathize very much with them because of the financial constraint. Many of them were using the savings to go abroad for kidney transplant, and instead of coming back with a new kidney, they were coming back in a box, in a coffin. So it really touched my heart that I think I have to look seriously into sports. It's no longer about medals and records, personal glory, but how can I make something really meaningful out of sports? And I think in 1987, that was my breakthrough in taking a new meaning in sports. Since then, 20 over years, I've been using ultramarathon as a platform to raise money for those in need in various countries, including Singapore. And the leukemia has been surviving leukemia. This month, actually, I turned 5 years old after my bone marrow transplant, and has given me a lot of impetus in terms of making the best use of my new lease of life. And I during my days of going through chemotherapy and my bone marrow transplant, I started to think very seriously about living life, building a legacy. So my contribution with my new lease of life is about how even we need not have to wait until we succeed in our life before we can be contributing Singaporeans, that we can make a legacy, we can build a legacy, no matter where we are in life, how young we are, how poor we are, no matter what financial status we are, we can start making and building a legacy. And I went ahead and set up a legacy foundation to help the community, help individuals to have their legacy where they are now, to make their contribution as young as they are. So it's my little social innovation. The term social innovation has never sort of occurred to my mind. Scientific innovation is something I embrace all the time. But when I met Penny Low way back in 2005, I was very inspired by her vision and her initiative. And it was not until this year that I touched base with her, cross path with her again. And it's really an honor to be speaking at this platform at the Social Innovation Park Forum, and conference.
And if you want to find out more as well, I mean, speaking of inspiring and, starting in your own social innovation, whoever you are, in whatever walk of life you're in, if you want to find out more about the Global Social Innovators Forum, be inspired by almost 50 to 80 high-profile speakers that have been attracted here to share their inspiring stories. Dr. Tan is one of them. Of course, you want to hear more, you can head on down to the forum that's happening on 28th November. And thank you so much, Dr. Tan, for coming in today. And Desmond, thanks so much for sharing about the GSIF as well. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This has been Between Us on 938 Live. I'm Angela Lim. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Man is a knot into which relationships are tied, but nothing comes between us. On 938 Live.